everybody, and welcome to the 5 People on the Go, the show that's all about tools and approaches for success for the most brilliant people. And today we have Gil Eyal, who is an expert in media, influencer marketing, and apparently a lot of other things as well. And we're going to talk about how to do influencer marketing correctly. Or, well, let's leave it like that. I don't want to give you any spoilers. So, let's start from first understanding what is your relation to influencer marketing. Are you an influencer?
I somewhat, not the type that you would see on Instagram, but I do have 13,000 followers on LinkedIn, 20,000 on Twitter. So
that's more than me.
Areas.
Okay.
Professionally, yes.
Okay, cool. So what is your relation to that? How did you get to be an influencer expert?
So I come from digital marketing, and my original foray into the space, I was working with different brands to get celebrities to promote their products. And sometime around 2010, 2011, I started recognizing that with the emergence of social networks, we were seeing that smaller people were able to gain audiences and influence them in different ways. But the way that things operated was that it was very, very difficult to understand who is actually influential, who do they influence, what subjects are the subjects that people actually view them as thought leaders in. And so I started a company called Hyper, which I ran for 7 years, sold it in 2020, which focused on the idea of analyzing and understanding who influences what subject and which audiences online. It became one of the bigger companies in the space, sold in 2020. And since then, I've been a speaker about the subject. I started doing my own investing. I've kind of abandoned the traditional way, and we'll talk about why, of doing influencer marketing, and I would advise you guys to do the same. Today, I invest in consumer startups where we can match a celebrity to the startup with the idea that the celebrity can then open doors to retail and other channels that otherwise would be very hard for consumer startups to open.
Interesting. So let's dive right in. For the people who don't really understand, first of all, what is influencer marketing? It's basically just taking a person that talks about the product, or there is more to it?
So influencer marketing has been diluted to the idea that if somebody has a lot of followers, they're an influencer. But if you go back historically, it's not a new thing with social networks. The idea that there are influential people in your life that help you make decisions is something that everyone has in their life. When you think about the first phone you bought, whether it was an iPhone or an Android or something else, somebody in your circle probably told you, hey, you should buy this, or you'll probably like this better. Same thing for the car, same thing for where you got your education. And pretty much every decision that we make, there's somebody in our lives that we look to that influences us. Celebrities have always been influential. Back in the 1500s, they would use them. People who were more popular and considered thought leaders would be used to manipulate decisions that were made. Cigarettes had cards of famous actors on them to get people to buy them. And social networks made it more accessible. So you don't have to be extremely famous. You could be a subject matter expert. But for me, the real component of a real influencer is that they actually have thought leadership in an area, that somebody who wants to spend money in that area, to make a decision about something in that area, would go and look for what they have to say about it. And that, unfortunately, doesn't apply to a lot of people that are included in this influencer category today.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because that's something that I noticed a lot, especially as someone who spends so much time in social media, that a lot of people are looking just for the number of followers, even if it's not relevant in the field. So you said there is some sort of change happening right now. Can you explain more what's going on?
Yeah. And you're looking for the number of followers used to be a mistake, but it's much worse now, because if you use social network and you're a consumer of the content, you probably noticed in the last few years that things have changed. The feed is no longer linear. You might follow 10 different people. You might never see their content because the feeds are now algorithmic. And what the social networks have found was that they've built themselves competitors, right? If you used to advertise on Instagram or Facebook or really any social network, you would go there, you would pay them, they would give you visibility for your content, and you would get results, ideally. And that became very expensive because the social networks were very, very good at creating scarcity. They would take all the people that want to bid on a certain subject and they put them in one pool, and they would get them to compete for who would pay them most for that visibility. And then they invented this idea of influencers, and they gave them followers, and they gave them this idea that, hey, if I post something, I'm an influencer, a lot of people will see it, and you don't have to pay the social network anything. So for a while, there was this chance where you could go and hire these influencers. You would get an enormous amount of visibility for very, very cheap. The social network would see nothing, and that didn't really sit well with them. So what we're seeing is that they've taken a lot of actions to minimize the visibility that influencers, and again, we call them influencers, but they're not really that influential a lot of times, get. And what do? So one is they have this algorithm that determines which content will be seen, and that algorithm knows how to recognize whether or not this is promotional content or not, whether it mentions brands or not. And so they minimize that visibility as soon as they recognize something like that. They also prioritize smaller influencers. So the bigger you get, the less support you get from the social network. Why do they do that? Because if they have a lot of people with 50 million followers, those people have a voice. Those people can go to the media and complain. Those people can expect an answer if somebody calls. But if you have a million creators with 5,000 followers, nobody really cares about any individual creator. It's very, very hard for advertisers to work with a lot of small creators. So if they want to get a lot of reach, they have to go back to the old model and pay the social network to promote the content. But most of all, it creates a situation where all these creators think that they're the next big thing. They think that they're influencers. They think that, hey, I have 5,000, I have 10,000, I have 20,000 followers. And so I'm probably going to have 100,000 down the road. But really, the algorithm is going to stop working for you once you become a little bigger.
Wow, that makes me think a lot.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what is the right way to do it. If this is the situation right now, how should we approach it? Let's say small businesses who want to promote something. Like, is influencer marketing dead? Like, they have no job now?
So influencer marketing, the way that it used to be done, is absolutely dead. Most of the industry will disagree with me, and they don't recognize it. But have you ever watched the Roadrunner? You know, the Wile E. Coyote that runs after the Roadrunner, the bird?
Yeah.
He chases her, and then he stands there for 3 seconds, and then he looks and he sees that there's no ground below him. That's what social media influencer marketing looks like right now. Big companies have somebody who's the head of social marketing. Their job is to make sure that they do the influencer marketing. And they're not going to tell their boss, hey, it's not working anymore, right? So there's a whole delay in reaction. So just like when there was a big opportunity, a lot of people said, no, influencer marketing isn't a thing. And then as everybody came into the market, the opportunity is disappearing, but there are too many people who don't want to admit that. The truth is, I have not seen many successful influencer campaigns done the old way. You can spend a lot of money on bigger influencers. The only opportunities I see today are small influencers. If you can find a way to activate a lot of small influencers and create a lot of content, then that gets visibility. Hiring regular influencers to create content and using that through traditional promotional content. So hiring a familiar face, putting them on your ad, and then using traditional digital advertising to promote that ad, but leveraging the fact that people
already know the person.
Face, yeah. Or going off the social networks, celebrities. That's what I do with my companies. It's celebrities, people who aren't reliant on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube to get visibility for your brand. They can go on talk shows, they can talk to the media, or they can ensure that your product is on the shelves at the big retailers.
Interesting. So I'm really curious because I'm thinking about people, like, for example, I heard recently that Mr. Beast opened a restaurant and he sold the most hamburger in the world. I don't know if that's like the right thing, but that's what I heard at least, and in one day. And it seems like these people became celebrities. So how is it different?
You know, every rule has an exception, and you're giving, maybe the biggest exception. So nothing, if you can work with Mr. Beast, that probably doesn't apply to what we're saying. But, 99.9% of the world can't afford to work with someone like Mr. Beast. And, he recognized an opportunity, he has a very, very loyal and significant audience, and he became big before all these changes came through. He's gotten to the point where, as a social network, you can't afford to lose him. If he ends up somehow trying to move his audience from YouTube to somewhere else, he's not going to be able to do that. YouTube has put it in place, so it's very, very hard for him to transfer his audience. Yes, he's got big followerships across different places, but still his base is on YouTube. And he's big enough to the point where he can do things like that. But it's very, very hard for me to think of even one other influencer that could do the same thing. It has done the same thing. It doesn't really apply for the others. What applies to Mr. Beast, the treatment that he will get from the social networks, the response he'll get from YouTube if he picks up the phone, is incomparable to anything that you could imagine would happen with any other influencer. And just to put things in perspective, the reason why he sold so many burgers was not because YouTube gave a lot of visibility to him promoting his Beast Burger. It's because Seamless and their competitors, Postmates and the other guys, they wanted that food on their app. They wanted something interesting to tell their people because of how big he is. So when you opened Seamless in the US, the first thing you saw was, hey, there's a Mr. Beast Burger, which by the way doesn't exist. It's just some restaurant that makes you that specific recipe, but there's no location. So he came up with a really great business and a way to leverage his specific big name that far exceeds any specific influencer status. But he's an icon. Like he's not someone that I can't find any comparisons. I can't think of one.
That's a little bummer to hear. Because I feel, I'm telling you the truth, because what I love about social media right now, and that's actually why I got so much into it, is because I feel everyone can find their place there. What used to be more of like the place for the bigger names, like you said, now everybody can find someone they can relate to. So if there is someone who creates a lot of content like me, and you want to be able to make money out of it. So you really think that these promotions don't work anymore?
Not only do I know that they don't work anymore, but the influencers agree with me. I speak with influencers all the time. They all confess to me and say, I feel bad taking money from advertisers because I know that it's not going to produce any results for them. And they know because they track how much visibility every piece of content they make gets, and they know what happens when they put promotional content in there. So the ones that are really, really big can still get away with it. The ones that are really, really small still benefit from the algorithm. But the ones who are stuck are the ones who have 1 million followers or have 500,000 followers. And they know that these videos won't do well and that they're not going to get repeat customers. And there are exceptions where the content itself is very, very viral, like Bang Energy or one of those. I don't know if you saw that campaign, where it works. The algorithms love it because people really laugh at the content and it's very effective. But even look at Ryan Reynolds, and his new company. The amount of money that he has to spend on getting on paid media to get visibility for his content, even though I would imagine he has 50 or 100 million followers, is enormous. I see his ads everywhere, and that wasn't the case 6 or 7 years ago, where all he needed to do was post on social media and it would go viral.
But what about when you just, for example, I know that one day I wore these glasses. I used these blue light glasses. And someone asked me, where did you get them? So that's part of being an influencer. Without actually promoting something, I kind of promote it just by my day-to-day. So that content still works, right?
You're the perfect person to do it because you're still in the area where the algorithms love you.
Okay.
Right. I don't know how many followers you have on Instagram or...
Well, on all media, I probably have 20,000.
Yeah, so you're in a place where you're exactly the type of person the social networks want to go after. They want a lot of people like you. The problem is that if you only have 20,000 followers, and if I have a brand that needs to sell $10 million worth of product, I need to activate a ton of you. How do I activate a ton of you? We are seeing some innovation in that space and some companies that are working on it, but it's really, really tough. How do you get enough visibility to make it worth the effort of working with different influencers? And you are a very nice and easy to get along with person. That's not the case with every single influencer. And if you have to work with 100, it becomes really, really difficult. And even that's not going to get you that much visibility compared to, say, hiring Kim Kardashian, which used to get you an insane amount of visibility. Now it doesn't. And it still gets you a lot, but nowhere near what it used to.
So it's actually better to maybe, I don't know if it exists, I assume it is because I just got familiar with it, but there is an agency who works with a lot of small influencers and just tell them what you want instead of going to one of the big ones?
There are a few services, like there's one called TrueBridge that I'm an investor in, full disclosure, that has like 500,000 opted-in influencers, and then they send them text messages to post about stuff. So you can activate a lot of them, and they're trying to do it. There are a lot of struggles in that space. There aren't any agencies that could do this at the scale that you really need if you're a big company. If you're Coca-Cola, you need 1,000 people. You need 10,000 people. It's just not something that can be done manually. We'll get there. I don't know where the social networks, what they'll change while we get there, but there is a lot of effort to create automation. The one thing that doesn't work is trying to activate them one by one and add another one and so forth, unless you're very, very good at creating viral content, which occasionally we'll see a brand do reasonably well or you know. And as spectators in the industry, we see that one case that did really, really well, and we say, oh, see, it can be done, but really there's hundreds or thousands of cases where it just didn't work. It doesn't mean there's no hope, though. You can do it. What you really should do is you should find really familiar faces, and you should succumb to the idea that if you want to advertise on the social networks, you have to pay the social networks. And I say this with utter disgust because I think they're horrible, horrible creatures, the social networks. But if you really want to get visibility, you have to go through their system. If it's TikTok, it's Spark Ads. If it's Instagram, it's whatever theirs is called. You have to pay them. You create the content that is very engaging with a familiar face to your audience, someone that actually your audience loves and cares about. The content is really convincing, and you go and you pay for visibility, and you compare that to your traditional advertising, and you see which one performs better. And if it performs better, then you put more money behind it.
So organic content is dead?
For commerce and for commercial use, yes. For visibility, no. I mean, statistically, things will go viral. Whatever the new dance is, whatever the new...
So it's more entertaining stuff. So if we kind of want to solve the formula about like organic content, how to still be viral and still be promoting something, then you need to think how you can make it entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of research on what the algorithm loves. So number one is really, really polarizing content. So sexist, political, almost racist.
Oh, things that create resistance.
That will get a lot of people to respond.
Okay.
And I'll give some, I don't know if you have influencers watching, but I'll give some tips.
Probably,
I have an influencer who told me this really fun trick, which I think people should try, which we'll talk in a second.
Okay.
So one is polarizing content. Two is really, really heartwarming, you know, saving a dog, somebody who couldn't walk and now can walk, that kind of stuff. Romantic stuff people really love. Humor, whether it's stand-up comedians or the pranks in the street, and sometimes it's stuff that's just, you know, annoying and like somebody who goes and disturbs a grocery store, people shopping at the grocery store, that kind of stuff, does well. Those are those tend to be the things that do really, really well. Dancing, sexy. There's a reason why OnlyFans is the only place where people actually pay for subscriptions, right? It's the only place where it works. And I get like an OnlyFans for this pitch every day, for OnlyFans for doctors, OnlyFans for actors, and it's never going to work. The only thing people are willing to pay for is that. So that kind of content does really, really well. There is an influencer friend of mine told me this tip. Whenever she does a video, she intentionally mispronounces a word in a laughable way. So like she will say, I'm very comfortable right now. And she'll say it like 4 times through the video. And she says immediately all the trolls start responding in the comments, mocking the way that she said the word.
Yeah.
And that tricks the algorithm to think, oh, a lot of people like this, and that she believes creates engagement. So if you're a content creator, give it a try. Let me know if it works. Yeah.
What about educational content? Because, well, at least I kind of have hope that people do want to learn something.
Absolutely. And there's, depending on where, it can do really, really well. So on YouTube, it can do really, really well within the specific niches that people really care about. So if you do, if you have a channel about learning how to play chess, don't expect content about fashion to necessarily mesh with that crowd and for the algorithm to know what to do if you do both of them. So, if you can create engaging and interesting, and I know you interviewed Nas, he's a great example of someone who knows how to do it.
Yeah.
If you can create knowledge, a transfer of knowledge in a way that's really, really interesting, that can do really, really well. Traditionally on YouTube, definitely less on TikTok and Instagram. Not impossible, but you'll find fewer examples.
Okay, so that could also be an option for businesses to promote themselves, because the moment that you start delivering knowledge online, you create organic video content that can work.
As a business, you should strive to have a strong social presence. You need to be an influencer in your space. It's not just social media, by the way, it's everywhere. When somebody's writing an article, they need to say, oh, I'm writing an article about your competitor. Who else is in this space? Of course, I know you because you're the thought leader. You're the one who brought up this idea. You're the one who said that, thought-provoking thing. So as a business, market leadership, appearance of market leadership, being influential towards your space. So, the same way that, say, Red Bull hosts these events, and it's very, very hard for someone to create a second Red Bull because of everything that their audience is loyal to in those events that they create. Having that unique presence, having that personality is really, really important. And we've seen it. Brands like Wendy's does it really, really well with their snarky comments on social media. It's very important as a business. Will it generate sales directly? Not always, depending on what you sell and depending on what type of business you are. If you're Dunkin' Donuts, all you really need to do is remind people you exist. They're going to want a donut, or they're going to want coffee, or if you're Starbucks. If you're, Samsung, it's going to be very hard for you to generate sales online from most content, unless you take somebody like Linus Tech Tips and he sits there and says, I'm using this new phone, I'm comparing it to the iPhone, it's so much better, 1, 2, 3, 4. On Google, where people might see it, not now, but in a year when they're Googling, which phone should I buy? So the way people reach your content is also really, really important. And think about it as an advertiser or as a marketer. On YouTube, a lot of the content is discovered through search. There's intent. I wanted to see this. I'm going to play this new video game. I want to buy this new video game. I want to see if it's any good. I'm going to cook something. I want to see how to make it. On TikTok and Instagram, it's much more discovery focused, a lot less search focused, even though they're trying to find their way into it. So you stumble into content that you like. The algorithms are really, really smart. They know how to customize it for you, but they don't necessarily fit you at the right time, right? So you might create an amazing video about an Android phone and it would have all the information. It would be very entertaining, but I just won't find it when I'm at that stage in life where I need to decide which phone to buy.
Okay, so I want to talk about what you said before, that businesses should have social media presence, because that's a discussion that I have a lot with CEOs that say, well, this is good for the kids, but I do B2B, that's different. So what is your opinion about businesses and video content? Should they do it? And also, should they be in the front? Because that's also a discussion that I constantly have.
Yeah.
So what's your opinion about that?
So I'll divide it into absolutely yes and depending on who's the person. Right?
Okay.
So yes, they have to create content. You can't be left behind today. It used to be that I just need a Facebook page and I'll be fine. No, your markets are really competitive. There are very few businesses that it isn't easy for other people to imitate, and there are very few businesses where you can't do it from far, right? If it's an online e-commerce store, and you're selling a product that's easy to duplicate, the only differentiator you're going to have is the content that you put out, the message behind it. We care about kids in third world countries. Our stuff is made this way. We have participated in this event that's really, really important. Take a stance, and we're seeing more and more brands take risks with that. I mean, if you think about it, when Colin Kaepernick decided not to stand up during the national anthem in the US, Nike, a multi-billion dollar company, took a huge risk and said, we stand by him. He's going to be he's going to stay one of our presenters. We're not going to drop him. He's going to be with us. And it sounds like a huge, huge risk, but I would argue that not responding to it would have been a much bigger risk, right? They didn't really have a choice. They need to be at the front because somebody else would have responded. And all the people that really, really care about this really, really big cause would take notice and say, oh, these guys didn't respond, and Adidas or somebody else did respond in a way that we really care about. And this younger generation really, really cares about what you have to say and who you are as a brand, which then brings us to the next question. And so you have to establish yourself not only as a thought leader in the space, but also as a trustworthy person. We see that with celebrities coming in to be the face of the brands. The Honest Company with Jessica Alba, I would argue initially, It was called The Honest Company, but the only reason people really trusted them was because Jessica Alba stood there and said, this is my company, and this is how we're going to do things the honest way. Now it's probably flipped. A lot more people know The Honest Company than maybe Jessica Alba, but now it's a $8 billion company, so it's very successful. But same thing with Ryan Reynolds now at the front of his companies. He recognized the fact that, yes, I could offer you low-cost internet through any company. Anybody can do that. But not everybody can have somebody that people really adore and really trust come in and say, I am here, I'm doing the ads myself, I'm not getting paid for the ads because I don't want it to cost more than $15 a person. And that hits home. That's a message that you can only do with you can't put that in a press release. You can't just have a message on your Facebook page. You need the person who's behind the company to stand up and say it. Which brings us to the point where if you're terrible in front of an audience and you're not going to come off as trustworthy, and not because you're not trustworthy, but just because you're a terrible public speaker, then bring on board somebody who's a better, it doesn't have to be the CEO. Bring on board somebody who's going to do it really, really well. But yes.
So you think it's better to have a presenter if you're not good on camera?
Yeah, personify your company. Nobody cares about brands anymore. Nobody cares about company, but they love people. Mm-hmm. We love the story of the gymnast who suffers from anxiety, and we can all connect to that. Mm-hmm. None of us care about gymnastics. It's amazing how much attention, I forget her name, but how much attention that got. And who cares about gymnastics? Like if I asked you, what do gymnasts do in the Olympics? Most people wouldn't know. But that story became a big, big story. So personify your company, make it person. Anybody who's a storyteller knows this, right? When you write a story, I'm losing the word in English, but the storyteller, the narrator, needs to be somebody that you have feelings towards. You don't have to love them, but you have to have feelings towards them because that impacts whether you trust them in the story and how you feel about the other characters and whether their perspective about the other characters. And it's the same thing with a business. It doesn't matter if you're B2B or not. The people who buy from you are still people. So yes, there's no point in hiring Kim Kardashian to promote your cybersecurity business that sells to CISOs in high-level companies. But you absolutely, absolutely want their developers to be really big believers in who you are and what you stand for. And think about it, even today, the biggest people in the world, Apple, people idolize Steve Jobs. Elon Musk, who in my mind is an unbearable, insufferable person, but he's got his fan base that love him and he's able to get away with stuff that he would never be able to get away with otherwise. So there's a ton of value. And I would argue that there's a reason why every 72 hours he does something crazy. Because he recognizes that he just needs people to remember he exists.
So let's talk about that, because that's a very interesting point. How do you create an online persona? Like, how do you build trust with your clients? And I want to focus specifically on businesses, because they usually have the biggest difficulty. Yeah. It's like you said, like the CEO of the cybersecurity company probably never stood in front of a camera in his life. Yeah. So how do you actually tell his story in an interesting way that can help him promote his business?
So again, it really depends on the person and who they are. There are cases where I would argue that, like the one you described, where it pays to bring in a senior person or a co-founder. It's not hiring an actor. It's somebody who really is part of the company and can, when people meet them, they recognize them as the face of the company. Not, you hired some celebrity to talk about your company. It's somebody that really personifies what you want the company to do. We did an investment with a company called Goodles, which is a mac and cheese, healthier mac and cheese. We brought on board Gal Gadot, and
I've seen that one.
It's done really, really, really well. Like it's slightly more than a year old, and it's like 5 times projections. It's the best launch on target that year, and you don't really see her doing a lot of ads. But when she talks about the product, it really resonates. Why? Because who buys mac and cheese? The moms do, but who eats mac and cheese? The kids do. So if something in that cycle doesn't work, if the mom buys mac and cheese and the kid's like, I don't like this, I want Kraft, she's never going to buy it again. But then if she goes to the store and the kid's like,
Wonder Woman, eat this.
Yeah, I love Wonder Woman. Of course I want this. And she's like, what do you think Wonder Woman would feed her kids? Even though we're not allowed to officially say that. That's what we hope everybody's thinking, right? And it also happens that women and men love her. She's really the kind of person that resonates with everyone. So you have to think about who that person is. And we brought her in as a co-founder. We did not bring her in as, here's 1% of the company to post once a month. She is a co-founder in the company. She tries the products. She came to events. She she was the keynote speaker at Expo West. She's really, really active. She sent it to all her friends. And so you want somebody who's really believably part of your company, whether it's a celebrity or not. But it's somebody with a personality like yours, somebody who naturally people like when they see, can talk about this credibly, doesn't sound like they're making things up, is able to say, hey, I don't know if there's an answer that's a little more complicated. And you build a personality, and the personality varies between brands. I mean, Wendy's can afford to be laughable and cynical and tell jokes because they're the number 3 brand. They're behind Burger King and they're behind McDonald's. So they've got nothing to lose. They're not going to fall to number 4. They're either going to gain market share or they're going to stay the same. McDonald's can't do the same thing. They have a different the persona as Ronald McDonald has been for many years. Little silly, cannot offend anyone. There's not a single person who would, unless you're afraid of clowns, there's going to be afraid of Ronald McDonald. So you have to customize and find the right person to speak for the voice of your company. And
so what should they say? Because one of the discussions that keep going on is how personal and how give value you need to be. It's those two divisions are always fighting each other. No, you need to give only value that's only in your niche, but some people say you need to post pictures with your kids and things like that. So how do you do it? How does it work?
There's no science to it. It has to be something that really fits you as a person. If you're the kind of person who's very, very private and it's going to kill you to post a picture of it with your kids, don't do it. But if you're the kind of person who establishes relationships by becoming personally friends with the people that you work with, then let that be the persona of your company and let that be the persona of the way people do business with you. And you'll attract people that are attracted to that. And the truth is that if you're the kind of person who finds that really inappropriate, it's probably going to hurt you too. So there's no satisfying everyone. We go back to the example with Nike and Colin Kaepernick. There are a lot of conservative people who probably didn't love their decision to support him, even though he decided not to stand up for the national anthem. So these are decisions you have to make with limited information, knowing that you're not going to please everyone, but understanding that the worst thing is not having a personality at all. And I don't know if you're probably too young, but there's a movie called Karate Kid that everyone in my generation loved.
Yeah, heard about it.
And Miyagi, who is the instructor to Daniel, Daniel said, well, how do I defend this and that? And he said, the best defense is not to be there. And what he meant was don't be in a fight or don't get in a fight with someone. With this, it's exactly the opposite. The worst thing you could do is just not be in the discussion. So you have to understand what makes your industry tick. You have to have a presence. That presence could be, hey, I'm, quirky, crazy Elon Musk. I'm a genius, but I'm crazy. Or it could be, I'm just, someone who, like Bill Gates' new personality, which is I'm going to help the world. All my money's going to go to donations and et cetera. But something that people really connect with. Think about a company like Allbirds, which is, the shoes, all about, how do they make the shoes? And one shoe goes to a third world country and all these things that appeal to a very, very specific audience. And that's who they care about. And they understand that there are people who couldn't care less and that's not going to make a difference to them, or they might even find it amusing, right?
So what do you think should come first? Building a brand and then creating content that resonates with the audience of the brand, or creating content that resonates with you and then building the clients accordingly?
It can happen both ways. If we look at Ryan Reynolds, it's the second case. It's more rare. It's a place where he's like, wait a second, I have a brand, the Ryan Reynolds brand. I know who the audience is. Now let's start generating products that I can sell to this brand. And others have tried it. Some have succeeded more, some have less. We look at Goop. I don't know if you're familiar. Are you familiar with Goop? So Goop is owned by Gwyneth Paltrow. It's the craziest company you've ever seen. They basically lie all the time. They post stuff about... they sell candles for your vagina, coats made out of what they claim are the materials made for spacesuits. And it's all about being crazy. And that's her personality. And, she's been fined and multiple times she's been called a liar by NASA and everything. But it sells billions of dollars. She's very, very wealthy from it. Now her new thing is she sells materials for your garden to make the plants grow, which is basically animal manure. And the new thing is Goop now sells poop. That's the, but it works. It works for a very specific audience. And she is ridiculed and hated. And people say she's a scammer, but it doesn't matter because her audience religiously buys her stuff and they'll pay $75 for a bag of manure. And so it works really, really well for her. The Honest Company we saw worked really, really well for a very, very specific audience, this more feminine audience that's conscious about health. It's upset that when they read the label at the back, it doesn't have the real names of the products, it has the scientific names. And so she hit on a nerve, and she's the person who can tell that story really, really good. She recognized that audience follows her and listens to her, and they want to look like her and they want to be like her. Most of us don't have that privilege. We don't have an audience. And so we have to come up with a product that solves a problem. The biggest thing is to understand, okay, where's there a pain point? Who is that audience? How do I build a product that solves that pain point in a very, very effective way? And then you build a brand around it.
And then you create the content accordingly.
How do I tell the story? Yeah.
Okay, because actually I had a discussion about it last week with two artists, with an artist about two artists. One of them has this luxury life, lots of girls, yacht, everything. And the other one is very family. He keeps posting pictures with his kids, and he can be really relatable. Like both of them are really relatable, but to a different kind of audience. So we thought about what is the right way to do it. And according to what you're saying, there isn't really a right way. It's about just finding the right audience and keep posting what's related to them.
If you really have a dedicated audience, it makes a lot of sense to start with them and then saying, okay, what do they need? What can I create that they're going to appreciate? And if you look at what Brian Reynolds created, one is like a gin company. Have you ever had gin?
Yeah, of course.
You have? Okay, I've never had gin.
Okay.
Usually when I talk about this company in meetings, I ask, and 1 out of 50 people might have had gin in their life.
Okay.
And I guess, there's a reason why he chose gin and not vodka or beer or something. He knew something about his audience, so he started with his audience. It's very surprising. Gin is not a very popular drink, typically here in the U.S. You are more European, so maybe you get more exposed.
I don't know, gin and tonic.
It's actually funny because I was speaking in a class at Wharton, and one of the students, I said, do any of you drink gin? She was the only one. I was like, how did you get to the point where you're drinking gin? She's like 22. And she goes, well, I'm a snob. So that's how she answered it. But
interesting.
Yeah. Most Americans have never had gin, and even now, but he has an audience. He sold the company for $600 million, so it's doing really, really well. With Goodles, we didn't create it with Gal Gadot in mind. The founder was very passionate about this. She understood that people were moving towards eating healthier food. And she was thinking, okay, how do I create a situation where I can target something that people buy a lot and create a much better and tastier, better for you food for them? Then we found Gal, but theoretically could have been somebody else if we had found someone that was a great fit for what we were looking for, that the kids would love them and that the parents would love them. And so in the examples that you gave, it really, really depends if they can recognize, if they have a loyal, strong audience base that has a lot of things in common, and they can recognize the pain point there's absolutely no reason not to try to solve that pain point. And sometimes it's very obvious, you're a travel influencer, and you can create a company that gets people cheaper plane tickets and you get a cut. That's obvious, easy, obviously belongs to your audience. Sometimes it's a lot harder to figure out.
Interesting. But I'm more curious about the personal side. So on a personal level, which content should you share and which not?
It really depends on the personality of the brand that you're trying to create.
Okay.
If you think about Ryan Reynolds, his ads, he has his mother, and the ads are he has her read something, and then it says, Ryan is cooler than his disgusting brother that I don't even like. And she's like, what does it say? And he's like, okay, cut. Those kind of silly humor with his mom. What does it tell you that his mom's there?
That he's a family man.
He's a family man.
Yeah.
He didn't spend a lot of money on bringing, talent, so it's cheap, because his whole message is it's $15, it's cheap, I do everything. There's a green screen in the background, there's no background, there's nothing, there's no other actors. The whole message of the content is subliminally, everything that you should love about this company. It's for families. We really care about you. You're part of our family. I'm introducing you to my mom. Who meets celebrities' moms anywhere? When's the last time you saw a celebrity and their mom? And it's very specific to him. It's a really, really good fit for what he sells and for the way his audience connects with him. If you remember many, many years ago, you might have been too young to see, there was a company called Priceline.
Okay.
And they had the Priceline Negotiator, which was William Shatner. He was the captain something from Star Trek. It was very, very humorous, but it was all nothing to do with his real persona. He created a character. It was super humorous. It was super funny. And he would tell jokes about how he can negotiate lower prices for you and your hotel. Priceline was basically like a search engine where you could find cheaper hotels. And it worked amazingly. The company was worth billions of dollars. It's a huge success in a market that's very, very easy to copy. Like a lot of companies do the same thing. So it really, really has to fit the persona of the person behind the brand. And do you want to be in the front or not? You don't necessarily have to be.
That's a really good point.
Okay. And whether you share your family is really a personal decision and can impact specific audiences. If you're selling, if you're selling baby products and you show your baby eating it, that's a really, really strong signal. Michael Jordan and Nike, when he got the Nike Air Jordans, the reason why that was so effective was because he was the best basketball player in the world, and he was wearing it, playing against the best basketball players in the world. Would he wear bad shoes to that kind of a game? Would he risk his feet? No. This must be a really, really good shoe, and nobody has to say that it's a really, really good shoe. What
about authenticity? Because one of the things that a lot of people say is that you need to create videos. Like, for example, I saw this app, Be Real, this last week, and its entire thing is about shooting yourself right now. Like, whatever happens, just right now, just be real. What is your opinion about that? Because if we're going with the direction that it should be according to the brand, not every brand should shoot themselves eating pizza. So what do you think about that?
I think Be Real is a nice gimmick that we'll never hear of in like a few months, but
hopefully
this won't be held up against me when they become the next TikTok. But I just don't think something that requires you that level of commitment on a day-to-day basis is going to work with today's generation. But maybe I'm wrong. But also, there's a reason why social media is built the way that it is. We all want to look our best. We don't want to be seen in that worst moment. We might say we do, but we want others to be seen in that worst moment. We don't want ourselves to be seen in that worst moment. We want to look good. We want people to think that we look good. We want if somebody finds it 2 years later, we don't want them to think that we looked bad. So I don't think that has a lot of future. And I think in general, authenticity is overrated as a marketing medium. And the truth is that marketers lie. They stretch the truth. They lie verbally or they lie implicitly. And the example I always give is like Smart Water and Jennifer Aniston. So are you familiar with Smart Water?
Yeah, the drink. Yeah, but I didn't see their advertisement.
No, you were like 12. But when this happened, they hired Jennifer Aniston. At the time, she was the biggest star on Friends. Perfect skin, perfect hair. Every woman in the world wanted this hair. And they were selling Smart Water. What is Smart Water? Bottled water. How do they get Smart Water?
I don't know.
It's pretty much, water out of the tap, and then they filter it a little bit, and then you have the water. It's not from a spring or not anything else. But they call it Smart Water. And they can't really say anything about it because it's just water. So they put it on a picture with Jennifer Aniston, and she's holding it, and her skin looks amazing, and her hair looks amazing, and she says it's a smart thing to drink. And you were like, now I know how she got that amazing hair, and then, not you, but like the audience, right? And so marketers lie. Often people don't trust marketers. And the second you become a marketer, you give up the idea that people really, really trust you. You can say, I'm an exception, and that's fine. And like Jessica Alba has done a good job of doing that. But the idea that, our brand is going to be really authentic and people are going to trust us is very, very, very challenging. I don't know that a lot of brands can pull that off. And I also don't know that people really care that much.
Interesting. Wow, okay.
Well, give me an example of an authentic brand.
Well, in my mind, what I think about right now is influencers. But like we said before, that doesn't work anymore. So
do you think they're authentic? I mean, they're getting paid to promote whatever product they get?
I don't know. You told me you work with them.
I think sometimes they are. Sometimes they happen to also like the product.
Okay.
But most of them need to pay the bills. And so that's a lot of responsibility to then trust in a person whose job is creating content online to turn down $5,000 because, oh, you know what, this really isn't the best tasting gum that I've ever had.
Because you do see them like post in all these dramatic situations where they just have their heart broken and things like that. So you do think they're authentic.
Right, they are.
Okay.
Until it's time to promote something, and then money gets involved.
I see.
And they're authentic because the algorithms reward it. Meaning, let's say, for example, TikTok decided that, hey, people crying in videos is not permitted. They would stop crying in videos. Or that's just not, that's shadow banned is what they call it, right?
Yeah.
It's this idea that, they don't even tell you that they're not going to show your content. It just doesn't get any views.
That's true.
And so the algorithms know how to do that. And the influencers and the content creators in general sit back and try to guess, what is causing this to be banned. And so...
so they create content accordingly.
Are they genuine? I'm not saying none of them are, but a lot of them aren't.
Okay.
And those are very good at appearing genuine. And so is authenticity valuable? In certain cases, yes. There's certain brands that it's very, very important for them. Is it the number one thing, the only thing that will say if you're successful or not? I challenge you to find like actual marketing examples of brands being really genuine that have done really well for their business. It's not that often. It's not impossible, but it's not that often.
Interesting. Wow. Honestly, I can speak with you for hours. This is so interesting. But I know that, it's a lot of knowledge and we should finish soon. Even makes me sad, but what can I do?
I'm always here.
That's awesome. So let's finish with like your big advice. What do you think is your number one tip for anyone who's needs to do any sort of marketing right now? What should they focus on? What will be like the main thing they should do? Your tip. Yeah. What do you think?
So I think I break down marketing goals as two. The main goal can either be creating awareness and visibility, which influencers are still very good at, and you can still do that with influencer content, so long as you're not really actively sending them to a website, which will immediately trigger the algorithms. But if you're focused on performance, the only three ways to be successful today, in my mind, and I've invested, let's say, millions of dollars into companies that do different things with influencers. Really find a way to activate a lot of micro influencers. So if you have a lot of fans, find a way to encourage them to create user-generated content. So if you have a lot of people visiting your website, take it off the social networks. So work with companies like BuyWith or that have their own or screens that we're on right now that have their own platform, and partner with them and have them ensure that your content gets a lot of visibility, or pay the social networks and treat it as digital marketing content. Use the influencers, use the content they create, and run it face-to-face with your traditional advertising and see if it performs better, and if it does, shift budgets in that direction. And then one last thing, if you can afford it, work with people who have presence outside of the social networks. Podcasts, celebrities, people who are not limited by algorithms.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much, Gil. This was amazing. I learned so much and I'm leaving this world. So I cannot believe what people who are just listening to it right now are thinking. So thank you so much for coming. And thank you guys for watching or listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it at least a little bit as much as I did. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in the next episode. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.